coach for retirees. Tell me just a little bit about how you got to that very unique role.
Yeah, sure. So I launched my business Lumina in May of 2016, so just hit 7 years. And I found the coaching realm when I was on my own fence of indecision. Mine involved more of, do I move home back to Kansas City or do I stay in Minnesota? And so I had a background in psychology. I worked with a coach and I was just blown away by the process and how quickly I was able to make really meaningful decisions about what I wanted to move towards. And so as my practice evolved as a coach, at first worked with lots of different people in different life transitions or changes coming up. And I still work with people in different life transitions, whether it be maybe a 40-year-old burnout in his or her job and wanting to make a change, but wanting to understand the pros and the cons or the risks involved. I would say about 60% of my practice is focused on the retirees or pre-retirees now. And that really evolved about 3 or 4 years ago when I was partnering with different advisor groups like yours and realizing that there's this major gap. Like you said, there's executive coaches out there, there's health and wellness coaches, but who is available to be a neutral sounding board for these retirees and pre-retirees that their whole life is changing in a really big way? So I got really excited about the holistic approach that I could take with clients in this realm. And I also got really excited that it's in a realm that I don't get to be a consultant in because I haven't been there and done that. And sometimes that surprises people. They're like, wait, you're coaching retirees? Like, how old are you? And I'm like, yeah, I haven't been there, done that, which means I'm going to take my bias out, which is super important for this realm of coaching, certified coaching that I'm in. So that's a little bit of how it's
Yeah.
evolved and how I hope to continue supporting people in this realm.
Well, what's great about that is you mentioned all the changes that happen. If you Google retirement mistakes, all the top hits are about money.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
saving, investing, when you apply for Social Security, et cetera, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we believe those decisions are really important. And that's what we help people with. And we want
Yeah.
people to have a solid financial
Yeah.
plan. But the finances are only one part of making a transition in retirement. And so what are the other dimensions that you see change and are impacted
Yeah.
when someone retires?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. And it's uh, we can definitely dive into the 6 common mistakes I see. But just recognizing first that it makes sense that people want the financial peace of mind first. Absolutely. They're usually not ready to talk to me until they've talked to someone
Hmm.
like you to make sure that, like, can I do this? Is
Mhm.
retirement a healthy option for me financially? Once that question is pretty well answered, then they're like, okay, and what else is on the table? And that whole question of, like, what am I going to do? And these other ones. So I guess I'll dive into the first mistake I see is that the the person is really focusing on what they're losing or what's ending versus the beginning and what they're retiring to. And actually, you guys, I went to your presentation a couple months ago, right? The
Mhm.
coffee one. And the very first thing that you said, help people ask themselves is, what am I retiring to? And that's huge. We want to make sure that we're building a bridge. We're not falling off a cliff here. We're not
Mhm.
diving into like muddy waters. No, like anybody would be scared to do that. We want to build a bridge and really see retirement as a beginning, not only an ending.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember talking to a retiree once who had a specific date in mind,
Mm-hmm.
and he was really, really pumped up for this date. And I asked him, "So, what are you going to do the week after?" And it was
Mm-hmm.
like he'd never thought about that before. It's probably an extreme example, but
Mm-hmm.
he thought for a moment and he said, "I don't know, but I'm not going into work." Like that was
Right.
his
Right.
concept of retirement was there's this end date and then I'm going to be done and my life will be
Yep.
great, but
Yep.
he couldn't define at all what that actually looked like.
And that's a great example because depending on the level of burnout that
Mm.
the employee is experiencing is gonna impact kind of their capacity to dream about what comes next.
Mhm.
And so being able to even put a little bit of arms and legs, and I'm not, this actually kind of goes into the mistake number two that I
Yeah.
see, which is you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have the next 12 months or 5 years or 10 years planned out to have a really satisfying and fulfilling retirement. But do we know what that first week will look like? And that first week might just look like rest, and you can give yourself permission for that. That first month might be rest, it might be vacation, it might be changing up your environment. There's all sorts of different ways that are going to be unique to like do it right for you. But again, putting just a little bit of arms and legs so that you're not too surprised.
Mhm.
Um, and that yeah, there's something that you really are looking forward to, because with that mistake number one about an ending, there is, I encourage people to grieve, to even
Mhm.
mourn, it's whatever aspects of their job or their identity, their relationships that they are leaving. There's many retirees right now that have been in their same careers, maybe not the exact same position, right, or the exact same employer, but a lot of them they have for
Mhm.
35 plus years. So yeah, take a moment, celebrate your growth, do the retirement lunch, like do the things and even grieve like, whoa, that's a big deal. And also give yourself that permission to have something that you're looking forward to.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I would say mistake number two is again, thinking that you have to have it all figured out. And I like the analogy of remembering what it was like to graduate from high school or college, and even the grace that you might give your grandkids to not have it all figured out. I started out, I think, as a physical therapy major, switched that right away when I realized chemistry wasn't my thing, and adapted to psychology. So give yourself in this later career time the permission to explore and experiment.
That's an interesting comparison. If you ask people, like I started out as pre-med, and
Hmm.
then I spent some time with the doctor and actually, doing ride-alongs and said, well, maybe
Oh,
medicine's not really what I want to go into.
yep.
But so it's easy to think of it in those terms because so many people have changed. But when you think of retirement, sometimes change or transition in retirement can feel bad because I didn't have it all figured out.
Hmm.
That's a really
Hmm.
interesting comparison. Okay, so if you're taking notes at home, mistake one was seeing retirement as an ending rather than a beginning.
Yep.
And then mistake two is kind of the flip side of that, and that is thinking that you have to have it all figured out. Do
Yep.
you see how long would you say it takes, in your experience, for retirees to actually? You mentioned like taking that deep
Hmm.
breath and leaning, feeling
Hmm.
the actual transition and maybe even some grieving. Do
Hmm.
you, in your experience, see any length of time that it might take to just kind of clear the air and realize
Mm.
what the new normal is?
Minimum 6 months, 6 months
Yeah.
to a year, I think makes a lot of sense. Because I do encourage people to like dilly dally, putter around, like, again, let yourself rest and recover. Um, but also, yeah, that exploration of what am I trying to build here. So I'd say a lot of times when I get to when my clients get to that, let's just say even like a week to a month from their retirement date, they're just
Hmm.
like, I don't know what this is going to feel like. I'm like, yeah, how could you? You've never done this before. So just, embrace it, be in the moment as much as possible, do the habits that you know are healthy for you, and then let some of this figuring out, come with time.
Hmm.
So yeah, giving even that, it might be helpful for people to know that like, okay, 1 month, I'm probably not going to be streamlined, like, maybe living my best life sort of thing. And I'm sure there's research on this, and I've come across different TED Talks where they talk about kind of these different stages of retirement where, first you've got the vacation, the freedom, the woohoo, and then maybe that 6 months to a year hits, and you're like, where's my purpose? Or actually, I'm a little bit bored. What do I want? And
Hmm.
kind of that messy middle. So my hope is catching people pre-retirement, that dip when they feel it is going to be less jarring.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
Mhm.
a little bit of a euphoria that comes with the change because
Mhm.
it's a big deal and the transition. is exciting and fun, and there are unknowns, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, if people have experienced burnout, like you said, they might not have even had time to think about it, and
Mhm.
so hit the transition, enjoy those first few months, and then, like you said, there can be a period in the middle where after 6 months to a year,
Mhm.
I was just talking to a guy who retired after decades in a government position, great job, and because of that, got to retire a little early, and is bored out of his mind because he used to lead
Sure.
a big team and have all these big
Sure.
daily interactions, and was a mentor, and all of a sudden he said, I don't have a
Mhm.
purpose anymore. I don't know,
Mhm.
and that
Mhm.
was jarring. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go into retirement with a 5-step plan. But okay, so number
Well,
one,
what
oh
you're
yeah,
talking about too, yeah, just to piggyback on that, you're talking about that translation. And
yeah,
it's not always, do I need to translate, what I was doing in the workplace to something in a volunteer way, but also like he had challenge, he had mentorship. Okay,
mhm,
how can I translate that? And that usually takes some time to put some specifics together. That takes maybe connecting with groups that you haven't been a part of before, and just even getting clarity on what do I want to translate here? What's energizing for me that I
mhm,
want to keep doing? And many people know what they don't want to do. They're like, I do not want to answer emails all day, right? Like I do not want to like
yeah,
micromanage or so great. That's a good place to start too. You know that what you don't want to do in retirement, and let's see if we can expand and open up the opportunities of what you do want to do. And make sure that our own expectations or assumptions aren't limiting in this time of like
yeah.
figuring it out, but to really have a sense of openness and like, again, give myself permission to explore and experiment.
Part of that permission is necessary because for a lot of retirees, if they don't have the time to explore beforehand, they don't have the
Right.
time to necessarily experiment.
Right.
And sometimes one of the reasons it's good not to know or have it all figured out ahead of time is it can be a good idea to experiment with
Mm-hmm.
those different elements of retired
Mm-hmm.
life. And like you said,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's volunteering, but you might have a big plan and
Mm-hmm.
then you get into it and then
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, this isn't what I thought it was, or I'm not getting to use my
Yep.
talents like I was hoping.
Yep.
And there's a style of thinking, design thinking, where you're trying to design your life in a way that you don't have to have it all figured out, but you just, prototype, make some small experiments and see, all right,
Yes.
yeah, I do really like this. And that just takes time and practice.
Right, right. I appreciate you bringing that up, that there can be some pressures sometimes for those pre-retirees to be like, wait, I'm supposed to be finishing up my career, doing all these handoff tasks and figuring out,
Yeah.
what the next, they're like, I this the mental capacity is not going to be there. And that's okay too, but again, knowing that there's a soft landing place for you on the other side of when your last day is, and that you do have some loose, I guess, plans of how you might figure it out.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we can maybe get into what that looks like.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. So mistake one, only looking at it as an ending and not a beginning. Mistake
mhm.
two, thinking you have to have it all figured out. What about
Yeah.
mistake number three?
This one I call not widening your web of relationships. So this is all about social wellness. And I think people instinctively know that social wellness is important. Relationships and
Mhm.
connections are important. And yet it is the area again and again that people are like, whoa, if I don't plan for this, this could be actually really detrimental to my health. And the reason I'm passionate about this one is research actually shows us that the predictor of how long we will live is based on our social integration.
Mm.
And they're defining social integration as the quality of your close relationships, so maybe a spouse, your kids, your family, the people that you're closest to, so the quality of those close relationships, and how many people you're talking to face to face. So this one
Mm.
was obviously hugely disrupted in COVID. And if you're curious about the research, that's from Julianne Holt Lundstad. And it's explained very well in a TED Talk by Susan Pinker. So maybe in our follow-up email, we
Yeah.
can make sure that TED Talk's in there. But we, gosh, I don't know how many people, they've been in their careers like you said, they're maybe mentoring, they're working with, training employees, all these different things. And like that is just going to actually like go
Mhm.
away. And they might suddenly find themselves 2 weeks into retirement being like, I've talked to my wife today and the neighbor once, like, so how are we going to plan and build that bridge for social wellness and actually widen our web of relationships? Because naturally, we just tend to get smaller and smaller as we age.
Yeah. And I think most people, like, they cognitively understand that, they probably spend 40 hours plus, with their colleagues. And
Yep.
so from a time standpoint of the week while you're working, that's a huge
Yep.
part of most people's interactions, social
Yep.
interactions. But then once that disappears, they know, well, okay, I'm not going to see my work friends anymore, but they don't realize how that's going to feel.
Yep.
I ran into a friend at church the other day. He retired a few years ago and actually moved. He and his wife moved out to be closer to their kids, where their kids have their careers. So I ran in. He was visiting, and I ran into him, and I said, "Hey, how's retirement going?" And his response was, "Well, the financial side is fine," because I was really well prepared for that,
Hmm.
but no one prepared me for the psychological side
Hmm.
and the fact that it's just really hard to find people to talk to throughout the
Hmm.
day.
Hmm.
And that was exactly what you're talking about.
Yep, yep. And it makes sense why you see people hanging out at like a YMCA, taking time with their morning workout, making sure they're saying hello to the trainer, the front desk people, because depending on your introversion and extroversion, you might need different levels of this.
Yeah.
But I think this is one of those areas that can be really jarring and surprising for people if there hasn't been just a little bit of foresight and planning for. Some people want to talk to less people. They're like, I'm looking forward to a bit more quiet and introversion time. Great. But again, it's kind of like, I don't know if you remember people, being in college and you just had roommates around, or you
Mhm.
like knew you were going to go to this club, or maybe you were a part of a sport. And then when you left campus, like, whoa, all these built-in things that
Yeah.
were just a part of your life. And so your career gives you built-in opportunities for social. So we want to make sure that we're just accommodating that, accounting for that shift. And
Yeah.
so maybe you do join that pickleball league right out the gate, just so you know that there's something on your calendar that will get you engaged with other people. Maybe you only do it for a month or two, and that's not the thing for you. Again, this experimentation. But we know that it takes mental energy to plan activities. How many of us get to like a Friday and we're like, oh, we have an open weekend. What do we want to do? What friends? Well, then, oh, well, they're out of town and, I don't really want to call and spread, it's like, so the more that we can do that might be like planned and prepared for us, it's why people join pickleball leagues or kickball leagues, right? Or be in a Bible study at your church or whatever it might be, so that there's some built in containers for where you might see people.
Yeah. And I know the balance of social interaction might be different
Yep,
for different people.
absolutely.
How have you seen in the coaching process? How have you seen people tackle that differently?
Yeah, I mean, from a spousal standpoint,
Could
or
be from a spousal, or I know some introverts, maybe the idea of like, hey, I'm going to retire and be able to go inside my
mm-hmm,
house and read without being
mm-hmm,
interrupted for a long time
yep,
sounds wonderful. But yet, like you said, the single best predictor of how long somebody lives is that
right,
social interaction. And that's true for introverts and extroverts, but it might
right,
look very different for an introvert and
right,
extrovert. So
right,
how have you seen, maybe that's the better question, is for somebody who's not as extroverted and who is
mm-hmm,
like, oh, retirement, yeah, I'm absolutely like, I'm
mm-hmm.
going to be with people every day, all day. I already have that plan. But for someone who hasn't thought about that, how have you seen the introverted side of retirees um,
Yeah,
be intentional about getting some level of interaction that might not be just
yeah.
hanging out at the YMCA and talking to whoever happens to walk in, kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think partly just sharing the research with them is really helpful and empowering for them to say, what this is something I want to be mindful of. And yeah, I could probably get caught in a book day after day and be totally fine and have dinner with my spouse, or, maybe go on a walking group or something. But I'm thinking of one gal recently who is going from the teacher world, so surrounded by middle school students,
Mm-hmm.
to a pretty like country life, and her spouse is not retired yet, and she was just thinking, I've really got to be mindful about this, and I might just need to go to the store more frequently. I mean, that can be something, grabbing a coffee, even if you're not grabbing a coffee with someone that you chose, like particularly trying to engage the barista, that counts for social integration.
Yeah.
Going through the actual checkout line rather than the self checkout, these are ways that you can just boost. And if, again, that TED talk that I mentioned, the research and some of the examples she shares are about like a village in Italy where people still drop off their bread to the door, or they go for their afternoon espresso. And so it's these little things that they don't need to be long. It
Yeah.
can be, trying to chat with the UPS man. So for the introverts out there, don't worry, you don't need to be like going to a social event, every other night.
Yeah. One of my first jobs was as a server at a restaurant, and I learned this from the mostly widows who would come in.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone's coming in for lunch and they're in, let's say it's a business meeting, and there's a bunch of people doing it, what they're looking for from their server is very different
Yes.
than when these widows would come in and you were their social interaction for the day.
Yep.
And so to be able to just get to know them and engage with them, and even if you have time, if it's slow to actually sit down and talk
Yeah.
with them, like
Yep.
that would make their day in a way that the power lunch, what
Yep.
you're able to do, it was very different. And so realizing that excuse me, um I don't know how many people they're going to get to talk to today, and this
Mm-hmm.
was an intentional way for them to get to be in public.
Yep.
um so
It's a
that's
great example.
yeah. Okay, so mistake one, thinking of an ending instead of beginning.
Yep.
Thinking you have to have it all figured out. And
Yep.
then three, not widening your web of social relationships. Because we're
Yep.
halfway to six, I'll make the note, like you
Yeah.
referred, that after the webinar, I'm going to send out an email
Mm-hmm.
either today or tomorrow that will include the 6 mistakes. It will include a link to your website. We'll include that TED Talk that looked at this research. I when you sent that to me a while ago, watched it, and it was really impactful.
Yep. Great. Yeah. Yeah. I hope those will be helpful resources for people. So mistake 4 is picturing your retirement as 100% vacation. And I realize that can maybe sound a little extreme. Like, is anybody really picturing 100% vacation? But just knowing that like surplus amounts of golf and the drinks with the cute umbrella in them or whatever it might be, like at some point is probably going to get a little bit tiring, and it's actually not going to be good for your long-term health and your soul, because we all crave a sense of meaning and purpose. So I am all for rest and
Mm-hmm.
rejuvenation and vacations, and for some people it really helps that like at that day one of retirement, we're going on vacation right away. We're changing up the environment. But vacations, we generally come back to, we come back
Right.
from and we dive back into whatever our day to day is. So the difference is nobody's going to be telling you what your day to day is anymore. And that's up to you to start to decide some of that structure, some of that purpose, some of that meaning. I have noticed that depending on the industry, this can be easier or harder for people. If they've been in an industry that has told them like where to be, when to be there. I'm thinking of an anesthesiologist client I had. He's on call. He knew his schedule. He did not have a lot of flexibility and freedom or autonomy with his schedule. And
Mm.
so that was really a challenge for him to picture having that. And he needed to practice thinking about the freedom of planning his own day
Mm-hmm.
versus someone else who maybe a teacher who's had some practice with their summers and planning that how they like, or a business owner who every day is different and they know what
Yeah.
that's like to plug and play. There's going to be some variability there.
Yeah. But I do see often that people in their minds, when they are dreaming about what retirement looks like, they just think of a vacation but longer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yep.
that they might not say it that way, but a lot of people think this way.
Yep.
And we've all been on vacations. When we get back from them, we're like, I need a rest from my vacation
Sure.
now. So intuitively, they know
Yeah.
like this might not be sustainable.
Yeah.
But it's not the same when it's what you're doing every day of the year. it's
Yeah.
just different than getting a
Yeah.
rest and leaving your daily life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this one even loops in with you guys as advisors. Like, many people might not be able to afford an endless
Yeah.
vacation. And so really thinking practically, okay, if I mentally am planning vacation and lots of travel, but my funds don't, support that lifestyle, again, minding the gap, where are we going to, find in the middle here that makes the most sense? And just remembering too that a little bit goes a long way in terms of service. So this again is going to be so unique and customizable for each person, which is what is so
Hmm.
fun for me as a coach, being able to help them find the right fit for them. But I'm not saying you need to go join 3 boards and, volunteer every other day or even volunteer every Wednesday, but a little bit of service, a little bit of mentorship, a little bit of translating your skills and strengths from your workplace is going to go a long way here in your sense of meaning and purpose and
Hmm.
engagement.
Hmm. Yeah, and resting or vacationing, it
Mm-hmm.
tends to be fairly self-focused,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that there's nothing bad about that. When
Right.
you're working, I think part of the reason people get burned out later in their careers is that our culture doesn't view cycles and rhythms of rest
Mm-hmm.
as highly valued. That we do like leisure
Yep.
and travel, but that's not the same as actual rest.
Yep.
And rest is really focusing back on yourself to
Yep.
recoup and rejuvenate. But if you do that 7 days a week, that self-focus, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
actually harmful. Back to your mistake number 3, and
Mm-hmm.
not pouring into other people. I
Yep.
had a retiree at one point who, fishing was his thing. He was going to retire and just fish. He loved to fish. And but before he retired, fishing was a weekend thing he would do with the guys, and they would go out together and they would hang out. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him a few years later and was saying, how's the fishing going?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not fun anymore. I go, why not? Well, he's retired and can go out all the time, but the guys that he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to retire or wanted to fish with, they didn't have the means to retire yet.
Yeah.
Um, some of them had passed away,
Yeah.
just as you age. Some of your friends might pass away before you do, and so he was
Yep.
thinking it's actually depressing for me now to go
Mm-hmm.
fishing because it's not like it used to be.
Yep.
And that was because he viewed retirement as I'm going to be fishing 100% of the time.
Sure.
And
So
so,
a couple of different things about that I'm hearing, and one is he had one bucket of relationships versus widening that
mhm,
web again of maybe a couple different buckets of where he could plug in, feel a sense of connection, belonging, and fun. And then, yeah, just even thinking about what makes sense for, yeah, it's kind of like a cupcake's really good, but if you eat one at every meal, it starts to kind of lose how good it
right.
tastes. So just thinking about what are the variety of things that I might want to do here. You were talking about the rest, and it reminded me of a client a few years back that had just like raced into retirement, full speed as far as like his medical profession, not the anesthesiologist, he was in physical therapy, but some 40 plus years doing this type of work
Hmm.
and really demanding. He had a travel schedule and went to his clients. And when he just was really having trouble thinking about translating that pace and gosh, I gotta fill it. And I asked him one time, I said, let's just put that aside for a moment. Like, what if it's your first week of retirement, you go out to grab the mail, you run into a neighbor, and they say, hey, Kyle, what are you up to these days? How's retirement? Your first week. And he's like, it's good. I'm just resting. I'm not actually not doing much. And I just gave him that example, and he started tearing up and kind of broke down. I was like, whoa, am I like worthy of rest? Can I do that? And so we really unlocked something in him that he was running at this pace because of something deeper about his identity that he had become to
Hmm.
believe. So sometimes actually the opposite comes into play where people are thinking they need to keep running at this speed or else something terrible might happen. And we actually do need to create some space for rest and rejuvenation and vacation.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot in there around just how we think about productivity and
Mm-hmm.
our value and worth and our identities. That's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I know mistake 5 is one that is kind of the flip side of this one, and
Mm-hmm.
that is
Mm-hmm.
share with us mistake 5.
Yeah, yeah. So this one's about physical wellness, thinking that health and wellness, and I use that term really broadly, is just going to happen for you.
Okay.
So you hear pretty frequently, maybe you hear this too, that with more time, instinctively comes more perhaps physical wellness activities. So,
Mhm.
oh, when I'm retired, I'm going to have time to go to the gym 4 days a week. Or when I'm retired, I'm going to have time to pull out those cookbooks and try new healthy recipes that I've been wanting to do.
Mhm.
Or yeah, when I'm retired, like then I'll focus on losing that extra 10 pounds or whatnot. And yes, time will be on your side, but how are your habits going to support that time?
Mhm.
So this one is not meant to tell people that they need to do anything particularly related to physical wellness. But if maybe you're finding yourself saying some statements like that around your freedom of time, I would encourage that person to then really think about that bridge again. How can I start to set up that habit now so it's actually really seamless for that health and wellness I'm wanting to work towards?
Yeah. So the mistake is thinking that wellness will just happen because now you're in
Mm-hmm.
this new setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yep.
think those of us who are not retired yet, we do this a lot, like saying, "Well, I'm going to start my diet after the holidays.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
I'm
great
gonna
example.
after whatever this next transition is, we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
start changing those habits
Yep.
or start changing particular lifestyle. But if the habits don't change, then it doesn't happen. At least not for me
Right,
usually.
right. And it's actually change, this disruption of your career change is a really great time to look at your habits and figure out what's working or start a new habit because again, you're already having a disruption. So looking at your environment, if people haven't heard of Atomic Habits by James Clear, he has a ton of really great articles, and his book Atomic Habits
Hmm.
has a lot to say around environmental design. And essentially, it's is my environment supporting the action that I want to take? So it could be something about the way you design your fridge or where the TV is in your house or all sorts of things. You know, the classic example of like setting out your shoes where you see them and, oh, yeah, I was going to go for a run or a walk today.
Hmm.
So all sorts of environmental aspects can really support the physical wellness that we desire and those habits in between. But just knowing that time in and of itself isn't going to make you do
Yeah.
it. So this one usually takes quite a bit of, I don't know, just like nuance and like details with that specific person as
Hmm.
far as what does accountability mean to you? What is it that you actually enjoy doing? What are your goals? Are you just saying you need to go to the gym 5 times because that's what you heard people need to go to the gym 5 times? Or do you even like going to the gym? Or is it a different physical activity that works for you? Those sorts of things.
Yeah. So if you're talking to somebody who's, let's say, 12 months out from retiring,
Hmm.
and they're saying, my job is very I don't move around a lot. I know I need to make a
Hmm.
change, but so that's one of my big, yeah, after I retire, I'm going to start
Yep.
changing my habits.
Yep.
What do you tell them when they're still 12 months out?
Yeah, so I focus on what I call the minimal viable movement. So
Okay.
kind of like minimal viable products for companies. Is there something that we can start this week that is going to like cast a vote for that person you want to be 12 months from
Hmm.
now?
Hmm.
But we're starting it now. So not only are you building up confidence that you already are a person that takes a healthy action for yourself, which means you're going to be more likely to continue being that person rather than start something fresh. Like
Hmm.
if we were to start retirement with a blank slate across everything, whew, that's going to be very overwhelming for people. So you mean I need to start physical health, wellness, and I need to start new social webs, and I need to start my structure of the day? People are going to be overwhelmed. They just are. So instead of having this blank, clear slate, if you're already casting a vote as an active person that you want to be, however you would define that, this could mean triathlons in your retirement. This could mean I go to one yoga class a week, whatever in between. But if we can start to cast a vote, let's take the yoga class, for example. Maybe you go once a month while you're still working, and then you already know that that's an easier thing to plug into when you're done working.
Hmm.
So the minimal viable movement so that there's not this jump.
Yeah. One of the things I've noticed with retirees that do really well physically is that many of them have hired some type of physical trainer,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that doesn't necessarily, it's not somebody who's trying to whip them into marathon shape or
Mhm.
something extreme like that. But whether it's maybe they need strength training and obviously working with their doctor to figure out like what would be
Yep.
best for them, but it ends up becoming some social interaction,
Mhm.
because they're
Mhm.
and if they can afford it, it is a fun way for them
Yeah.
to have some outside input on their health in
Absolutely.
addition to their doctor.
Great tool. And accountability. Again, there's
Mhm.
some folks that they put, I'm working out from 2 to 3 today on my calendar, and they know they're going to follow through. There's many of us that need that outer accountability. They need an
Yeah,
appointment with a trainer at 2 o'clock to know they're going to show up.
yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, so mistake 5, thinking health and wellness will just happen for you.
Yep.
Before you jump into mistake 6, I want to mention that at the bottom of the Zoom window is a Q&A button. And so if anybody
Oh,
has
yeah.
questions, we will have some time at the end for you to
Hmm.
stick around and answer questions. So if anyone has questions for Samantha about that retirement transition, feel free to drop one in. Even if you don't
Yeah.
have a
Awesome.
question, one thing I would ask is if everybody would go ahead and answer this question in that, so you can hit the little Q&A. What's one mistake that you personally want to avoid? So it can be one
Hmm.
of the 5, almost 6 that we're going to share. It
Hmm.
might be a mistake that you've seen in someone else's life that you
Hmm.
saw someone retire and were like, I know I don't want to do what that person did.
Yep.
So go ahead and in the Q&A, either ask a question if you have a question, or answer a question. You're
Share
the
with
only
us.
not
Yeah.
we'll see it, but it's anonymous. Not everyone else is not going to see it. But what's one mistake you personally want to avoid as you think about retirement? So
Yeah.
okay,
I'd
so
love
on
to
that,
hear. Cool.
mistake number 6.
Yeah, and it really kind of goes off of what you just said about the trainer is not having a trusted sounding board in retirement. And so this is where thinking you have to go it alone or
Mm,
struggle on your own, whether it's your physical wellness and saying, hey, you know what, I'm just going to ask for some help and have a trainer and get those appointments on the calendar. Same sort of thing with retirement is that you've never done this before. It is a very unique transition. And so it's okay to want a neutral sounding board and some help to figure it out. And of course, I would promote a coach. I love my coaching profession. And again, I'm not the expert on you, so I'm not going to tell you what to do to have a fantastic retirement. But to be able to have somebody, whether it's a friend who's retired, whether it's even more conversations with your financial advisors, or whether it's hiring someone like a coach to say, what's going to make sense for me so that you feel really confident and clear on how you're navigating this transition. So that's mistake number 6 is just thinking you have to go it alone.
yeah,
And not having a trusted sounding board to really experiment with and kind of ping pong some of these ideas with.
I think of this kind of like a guide. If you're
Mhm,
planning a hike to a place that you've never been before and there's a
mhm.
guide service that says, "Hey, we'll take you up there. We will, help with transportation. We'll tell you what to bring. We'll even
Yep,
help with the meals, all that fun
yep,
stuff." It makes it so much easier on you because they know the territory. They know where they've gone.
yep.
Um, Obviously from a financial planning standpoint, we help a lot of people through the financial side of things.
Mhm. And
I've
I'm so
never
glad you do.
Yeah, and that's important. But I
Yes.
haven't personally retired, but as a
Mhm,
guide,
mhm.
I have helped lots of people through that transition. You haven't personally retired,
Right.
but as a guide, have helped lots of people think through all these other dimensions of wellness.
Yep.
Just like if someone's selling a business, they're gonna have a lawyer or an
Mhm,
accountant involved. If somebody has a medical thing that they have questions about, you're going to
mhm,
hire a doctor. You're not going to
mhm.
try to just self-diagnose yourself with Dr. Google, hopefully.
Yeah,
um, so
yeah.
yeah, I think and I am really glad that we have a newer field like retirement coach to help out.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. It's great to share with people because I don't think there's a lot of coaches out there like me focusing on this transition, and people often don't know that that's even an option. But like those other examples you just shared, I'm 8 months pregnant and I have a physical therapist. And it's been so helpful to go to her to have a different observing eye when I'm doing a lunge, for instance, or doing a squat, because I might think it feels okay. And she's like, oh, I just noted this, make this little pivot. So
Mhm.
we often need resources and people in our lives to be just another set of eyes, help us with those blind spots, like you said. And one of the analogies that's been used with coaches is often, so you're still in the driver's seat, you are driving the car, but I'm in the passenger seat and I'm helping you pay attention to those potholes ahead and empower you to be in the driver's seat and go where you want to go. Think about what we're aiming for, all those different things. And generally, we're not looking backwards all too often. If there's something in the rear view that needs some healing or some space to explore, that's where therapy comes in.
Mhm.
But coaches are really trying to empower in that like present moment of where are we headed? How are we going to get there? Let's get there smoother and faster than you would on your own.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, I'm going to share ways that people can engage you or talk to you to
Yeah,
see what
yeah,
does that coaching look like.
yeah.
But I want to read some of the answers people gave to what's the mistake that they want to avoid.
Please do.
One person said sleeping their retirement away. They wanted to
Yep,
avoid making that
good.
mistake. And I think we've talked about this. The statistics that show the number one use of time in retirement is watching TV.
That inertia of
And
the couch is real,
yeah,
unfortunately. It's just so accessible and it's so entertaining.
yeah, and it's a default. So if you don't
Hmm.
know, if you don't think about it or know what else to do, it's easy to
Yep,
um, just sit down and get started. So sleeping away. One person mentioned running out of resources to be able to
mm,
live that enjoyable
yep,
life. So that's
yep.
um, uh, what's
And even
interesting.
brainstorming, sorry if I could just jump here for
Yeah.
a minute. Brainstorming, is there a part-time gig that feels meaningful for you that both hits maybe on some of these physical or social wellness aspects and brings in a little bit of income so that that worry is minimized for you?
Yeah. I had
Yeah.
one guy who he retired. His wife was still working and was struggling with some of this. He had a really nice car
Hmm.
and was lonely. So he started doing Uber
Hey, there
and
you
driving
go.
people around, and he loved
Yeah.
it. He was doing it partly for the extra fun
Hmm.
money, but it more became like, and because you can turn it on and off whenever you want. For him, it
Yeah, so he's in
became,
charge of his hours. That's
yeah,
great.
it was that social side where he could just have fun meeting people and fill his time in a way that
Hmm.
helped others and made him a little bit of side money. And that's the same. That's that.
And drive this car that he wanted to drive.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, One person mentioned a mistake they want to avoid being doing too many activities not involving the spouse. So kind of planning
Mm.
like, oh, here's my retirement, but not thinking about how will my spouse be interested in those activities
Yes.
that I'm thinking
Yes.
about.
I'm actually glad they brought that up because with the social wellness, we focused a bit more on kind of the others, the community stuff or the quick chats. But a big part of it is the quality of your close relationship,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of people are really excited to spend more time with their spouse and they want to do it in a meaningful way that works for both parties. So one of the, I guess, reflection activities you could go through is what falls under me time and what falls under we time, and are we on the same place with that?
Mhm.
Do we need to talk about it? Do we need to adjust? Would it be fun for both of us to start a new hobby together? So yeah, that's really great to be thinking about.
One question somebody sent in, it is a good point that a lot of times in retirement there are surprises. So
Hmm.
unexpected changes, whether
Yeah.
that's, I see this sometimes with getting laid off. Maybe
Yep.
someone didn't choose like, hey, I'm excited, I'm going to make a retirement
Yeah.
transition, but the company said, you're going to make a transition right now. Or they specifically mentioned like an unexpected divorce
Sure.
or things happen like that. Maybe,
Medical.
yeah,
Yeah.
a diagnosis. How, so
Hmm.
on, so those difficult transitions are on top of all the other things
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
happen in retirement.
Yeah.
So how does the advice or coaching adapt when there's those unexpected transitions on top of everything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this we know is sort of the ups and downs of life. Unexpected changes and unexpected things can happen pre-retirement. And maybe because there is more space, and we also know that the different elements of aging, that this would be more top of mind. And I would say I support people with this when we think about spiritual wellness. So this one hasn't come up today, but in the 8 dimensions of wellness that I often support people with, I completely forgot we have that slide if you want to pop it up.
Yeah, let me throw that up.
Okay. So spiritual wellness is one of the 8 that we want to be mindful of. And it makes sense when we're thinking about some more existential questions as we age. You had mentioned earlier, even stories of, okay, some of my family or some of my friends have passed away, and that gets us thinking in a different way.
Mhm.
So these 8 dimensions of wellness are from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. I didn't make them up, but I use them as a platform to give some shared language with my clients. Oftentimes we'll do a check-in about these in a welcome packet. And it's just a way that we can kind of be thinking of that whole picture again. So
Mhm.
spiritual wellness, back to your question, Jonathan, I would say is when we're rooted and grounded in our values, or we're rooted and grounded in our spiritual connection, whatever that might be, it's going to help us navigate those bigger waves, those bigger unexpected events that are
Yeah.
surely going to come up, whether they're happening to us, like a medical event or a loss, or if we're just walking alongside our loved ones during a medical event or a loss or a friend, whatever it might be. If we're rooted in our values and our integrity, and we have a sense of that purpose and meaning in our life, it's going to help us navigate those a little easier.
Yeah. I had a friend who dreamed in his retirement of missions. That was going to
Mhm.
be, he was going to travel the world, and he was really excited about it. And after he retired from a great professional career, right, like almost at the exact same time, his wife was diagnosed with a very severe illness that
Mhm.
basically meant he could never leave her side.
Sure.
He was home. And talking with him a few years into that, where that looked so different than what he dreamed of,
Yeah.
and serving people all around the world, and instead God called him to really serve his wife in this difficult way. It wasn't easy, and like you said, it's that spiritual, it was a process for him to even wrestle with this, about this
Yep.
identity is changing, but it was possible. And definitely,
Yep.
I would add, with your mistake number 6, not needing to do it alone. Like
Mhm.
you mentioned it, and some of these, like with the financial dimension, that's what we can help with. I know
Mhm.
as a coach, you're helping with a lot of these. Some of
Mhm.
them might require more specialized, like
Absolutely.
talking with a pastor, or talking with a therapist, or talking with a physical therapist, and
Absolutely.
thinking of help in all the dimensions instead of just one. I think is one way to answer that question somebody sent in.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. And
all right. Oh, go
yep.
ahead.
No, let's keep going.
Well, I was going to share, or ask, I should say, um, if someone wants to engage a coach, how do they do that? What does that look like?
Yeah. So for me specifically, I work with clients in 2 different ways. Generally, partnership is one-on-one. We might start with a 3-month engagement that includes 9 coaching sessions via the phone. So you don't have to be in Kansas City, coach people all over the country. And so that's a really great way to build rapport and get some clarity and movement. And you might say, well, why 3 months? Well, some coaches really lock people into 6 or 12 months. And I've seen people make really great momentum in less than that. So I don't want to do that. But I've also seen when we start with 1 month that there's a lot of pressure to figure it out in 3 sessions. So 3 months has been that sweet spot where you're going to get movement and clarity. And then if you want more, we can go month to month after that. So that's one
Mhm.
way to work together. And then I'm really excited about a new offering. It's a group coaching model that I just launched this year. And it's an opportunity for pre-retirees to come alongside their peers and gain awareness and confidence for all those different dimensions that are going to be disrupted that we've talked about today. So a few quick notes on that is it's a 9-week virtual program. And so it goes through the 8 dimensions. There's a chapter for each of those dimensions that we just showed. And then the 9th week is a wrap-up session. And so it's a 1 hour weekly Zoom, virtual again, with your peers, groups of anywhere from 6 to 12, so that you guys can really be sharing with each other about what to expect in these dimensions and brainstorming ideas so that it feels really healthy and good. There's a personal workbook that comes with each chapter developed by me for your self-awareness. Again, this is not me prescribing how to have a fantastic retirement. They're open-ended questions because I believe with reflection comes awareness, and with awareness is going to increase our confidence and our good decision making. So that program is called Retire Wealthy, WELLTHY. And again, really excited that that's a new aspect for people. If the one-on-one doesn't really float their boat or sounds a little too intense, then there's this other option to go through with your peers. And I mentioned the pregnancy, so I will be taking a little hiatus from those groups, but more groups will be launching in September, October, and November and later this year.
Yeah. Well, so in the email that we'll send out, we'll include this link at the bottom, as well as your contact info, so that I think takes you to this page where people can either look at that group setting, or they can instead focus on the one-on-one if they're interested. So awesome.
Yeah. So that link would be a great way to just grab a little time on my calendar and let's get acquainted, see what your situation is. People often ask, like, when's the right time to start coaching? And I would say for the Retire Wealthy group, if you're anywhere from 4 months to 3 years, that's what the first group cohort, they were people all within that spectrum, and they wanted to just start to get some plans together and not feel anxious about it. So if you're more than 3 years, it's possible it could still be a good fit for you, but I would want to make sure, we talk about that before deciding. If you're right, like I'm retiring next week, probably a pretty exciting time. It might not be the best time to jump into the program, but let's chat and, maybe there's a later cohort for you, or that one-on-one would make sense once you kind of get that fun freedom vacation out.
Yeah, kind of like the financial planning process. If you have more time, you can think about it a little bit more. So you said 4 months before retirement, or maybe even up as much as 36 months before. Okay. All right.
Yep.
Well, I firmly believe that clients, if that go through a process like that and think hard about all these different dimensions of wellness, will have a better retirement. They'll be more content in it. They'll be more confident in it. And what I hate to see is when we have a great financial plan, but retirement is not enjoyable, and it's not, they don't find the deep satisfaction they're hoping for. So we are glad that we know you and are connected, and congratulations on expanding the web of your social circles with the little one coming soon. So I'm glad that you were able to join us, even though we're getting close to the due date.
Me too. Yeah. Thank you so much for the invite. And you said it so well. I mean, that's what it's about. It's about preparedness and awareness and that confidence boost so that people can really enjoy the process and enjoy what you've worked so hard for all these years.
So, well, thank you for sharing, and good luck with your little one coming soon.
Thank you.
And we'll send out an email with Samantha's contact info, as well as some of the resources we talked about today. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either myself or Samantha.
And thank you, Sound Stewardship, for caring about your clients in this holistic way that is unique. There's some financial advisors that just want to deal with the money, and that's that. But I've noticed with you guys for a long time that you're so much more holistic, and just really appreciate you extending the invite for me to share today.
Thank you. And we did record this. Fortunately, I remembered. So we'll have a replay available for those who couldn't make it. So we'll send that out in the link as well.
Okay, awesome.
But that is it for today. We thank you, everybody, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Okay, see you later.